Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. This week, I had a chance to talk to the Speaker of the Florida House, Miami State Representative Danny Perez. We spoke at length about Alligator Alcatraz, but we began our discussion on the legislative session and the budget.
I think overall, this was a phenomenal session. In my opinion, one of the best sessions the state has had, definitely the best session that Miami-Dade County has had. And I'll tell you why, Jim. We said we were going to be fiscally conservative, and the House proposed a budget that was lower than the governor's proposal, and we executed on that. We passed a fiscally conservative budget that included the largest tax cut in the history of the state of Florida, while not cutting the necessary services. We didn't cut Medicaid. We didn't cut education. Education's at an all-time high. Every student, the per student funding for every student in the state of Florida at an all-time high. But we haven't had a formula like that for success. And here in Miami, we were able to increase the salaries of our teachers, increase the salaries of our law enforcement, implement the Kendall Parkway. The western part of the county has been sitting in traffic forever, trying to get to work. They're trying to get anywhere, to be honest. We put $100 million to start the Kendall Parkway process, which I think in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, Miamians will look back at this session as one of the best simply for starting the process of the Kendall Parkway in the western part of the county.
All right. But, you know, folks sitting at home will say to themselves, you didn't do anything to substantially cut sales tax. You didn't do anything about property taxes. And insurance is still, homeowners insurance and windstorm insurance is still a major problem. Did you really address the issues of affordability in Florida? Absolutely.
And I think all three of those concerns are normal. And I do think we moved the needle in the grand scheme of things on those issues if you look at them through one scope. Sales tax, that was my initial proposal because I was trying to cut as much taxes as possible in the broadest way possible. And sales tax was, I thought, the broadest tax. But which tax was cut wasn't the priority. It was as long as we were cutting taxes, that's what I wanted to do so that people can stay with their hard-earned money in their own pocket. The sales tax was not what we implemented. Instead, we implemented a variety of tax cuts. For example, the business rent tax to help our small businesses. We eliminated the business rent tax. That was a huge win for us in the state of Florida. The property tax issue, we did begin that discussion. But we have to remember, Jim, the legislature cannot abolish or diminish property taxes. Legislatively, we don't have that power. The people have to vote in order to abolish or diminish property taxes. And that would have to happen in the 2026 election.
I want to turn to Alligator Alcatraz. I know that you were out there when the president came down just before it opened. I know that you toured the facility. Address the notion that a lot of people have that this is, I mean, even the name Alligator Alcatraz seems to be some sort of a smirking, dehumanizing way of sort of treating more and more people. Why is this a good idea to create this sort of camp out in the Everglades where you know you're going to have issues with flooding? Forget about winds and hurricanes. Flooding is going to be a major concern out there. Why shouldn't this just be seen as a gimmick by the governor and the attorney general?
Well, we have to start by answering why we're in this position. Under President Biden, when criminals that were in this country illegally were caught by the cops for whatever crime it is they committed, the state was holding them, local law enforcement was holding them, the federal government was never coming to pick them up, and we didn't have enough beds to house these criminals. And so one of the goals that we had in our special session was to have more beds. Beds isn't a prison or a jail, but beds isn't a 5-star hotel. Beds are essentially detention centers. That is what this facility is. I saw it. It had flooring, it had air conditioning, it had restrooms, it had lawyers, it had clergy, it had laundry, it had food, it had water. All of that was there when I saw it, and that's what it should have. But again, Jim, this should not be a 5-star resort. These are criminals that are being housed in this detention center. And the reason that we did that is we had to hold these criminals in order for the federal government to come pick them up and deport them back to their country. We should not have illegal aliens that have committed crimes in our backyards. We should not. And that was the whole point of this. Just to give you a background, Jim, when we had our first conversation with the federal government during special session, there was a couple priorities that they had. They wanted us to catch bad guys. They wanted us to have more beds, and they wanted us to have more badges. That is what we focused our policy around, and that's what we were accomplishing at. The beds portion is part of the detention center that is called Alligator Alcatraz. That was a part of our goal.
But you keep saying, referring to them as criminals, and we keep hearing about bad guys and the rest of it. But every study I've seen shows that the overwhelming majority of people who have been detained by ICE do not have a criminal history, or at worst, maybe a traffic infraction. That you are not rounding up the worst of the worst. Yes, some of them are, but that's a very small percentage. That, in other words, in order to reach the goals and all the bravado of deporting upwards of hundreds of thousands of people a year or a million people a year, you're catching people who are in this country showing up for their regularly scheduled hearings, who are not committed any crime, who are just jumped out at and arrested in their front yards. Do those images not concern you, that this has gone well beyond bad guys that are being rounded up?
I don't know what images you're talking about specifically, Jim, but I do want to answer your question directly. I did look into a couple of those stories where people were saying they were just showing up for a meeting, regular scheduled meeting, and they were getting picked up. I watch the media just like anyone else. I don't work for the federal government. The federal government is the one in charge mostly of immigration. We don't, we work in conjunction with the federal government, but it's a federal issue. And some of those did have outstanding warrants when they were showing up to their meetings. So I think every single story has to be seen at face value. I don't think we can look at them as a whole. What I can tell you as the state, what our goal was and what our objective was when we passed this bill, and what we believe is happening, is the people that are being transferred to the detention centers in our state, which, by the way, this houses 3,000 illegal immigrants that are in our country that have committed crimes, 3,000 people. The reason why we had that was so that the federal government can come pick them up and deport them, because I don't believe that criminals who get picked up for committing crimes, which, by the way, was happening under Biden, eventually get released back to society.
So
a person who's committed crime should not be able to go back to society and do it all over again.
I just want to be clear. Are you saying that the only people that are going to be brought to Alligator Alcatraz are people who have committed a crime in the United States? And I'm not referring to the crime of entering the country illegally. You're saying that any individual that's transferred to Alligator Alcatraz must have committed a more serious offense after getting into the country illegally. Is that your standard?
Here's what I can tell you, Jim. Any person that is in the detention center was stopped at some point for probable cause, was stopped at some point because they had a warrant out for their arrest. At some point, these people committed some sort of crime. No one is getting picked up off the street because of the way they look, getting put into a back of a cop car and sent to Alligator Alcatraz. That is not happening. I understand that's what the media wants to portray it. It gets a lot of clicks, but that is not what's happening. And quite frankly, that shouldn't happen. What should be happening is criminals should be getting put into the detention center, picked up by the federal government, and sent back into their country. That is what the policy is that we passed. That is the goal that we wanted, and that is what is happening. Have I been in the Alligator, quote unquote, Alcatraz over the last week? No, I haven't been there, but I was there 2 weeks ago. I did see it for myself, and the videos that I saw at the time were accurate. I think that there was the right facilities, there was food, there was air conditioning, there was water, there was bathroom, there were lawyers, there were clergy, and that is what they should get. By the way, I don't think that everyone should have their own room. These are criminals that are in there. I mean, this is way better than any prison or jail they would have been to if they were an American. I can tell you that.
I mean, you understand that this is not a facility that's high up on high ground. Forget about the wind, and even though I find it amazing that officials are saying that this can withstand a Category 2 hurricane, those tents, forget the wind. You and I both know flooding is everything in a hurricane or a tropical storm. Are you confident that this can deal with the flooding that is inevitably going to come this summer?
I believe it can, Jim, and if it doesn't, then something has to be done to fix that, to remedy that. I believe it is ready to go. I think it is ready to sustain the Category 2 hurricanes. That is what the experts believe. But Jim, that's not my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is to make sure that the state passes laws, that it works in conjunction with the federal government, and that we keep illegal aliens who have committed crimes out of our backyards. I mean, that is my job. Anything outside of that is not something that I'm occupied with. But I hear you. I hear the concerns. I mean, they're legitimate. I don't think that you're crazy for saying your concerns about a hurricane or flooding. Those are valid concerns. We believe that we have solved for that. And if we haven't, well, then we can cross that bridge.
Would you like to be out there during a hurricane, a Category 2 hurricane? Would you like to go sit out there and ride it out?
I haven't committed any crimes, but if I would have committed any crimes and that's where I have to be held before I get deported back to my country because I entered this country illegally, then I should have no other remedy but to have to sit there. I mean, that's the part, Jim. You're asking me as an American citizen who hasn't committed a crimes that should put me in a place like a detention center if I want to be there or not. Well, the other day someone was telling me about a man who committed aggravated assault, and he was in there and he was complaining about the mosquitoes. Well, the man committed aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I mean, for you to compare a guy like that who's complaining about the mosquitoes, whether legitimate or not, I have no idea, to an American citizen who hasn't committed aggravated assault with a deadly weapon are two completely different conversations.
I'm just saying, if you're confident that that facility will be fine in a Category 2 hurricane and dealing with the rising waters and everything else that comes with it, if you're confident that it'll be okay, would you be willing to ride it out there as well?
Jim, your hypotheticals are insane. Look, if a facility is safe enough, kind of like our emergency centers, right? They're built to withhold hurricanes of massive wind speed. If I had to be in an emergency center, I would believe that the engineers are putting me there because it is safe enough. If we are putting people into these detention centers and we believe it will withstand a Category 2 hurricane, you're right. It's not a Category 3 or a Category 4 or a Category 5. And in those instances, the state and the federal government would have to make a different decision on what to do with these criminals. But if we believe it's going to hold Category 2 windstorms, I have to have all the faith that it will.
There's been a lot of curiosity and speculation as to what your future is. Some people have speculated that you're interested in possibly running for mayor of Miami-Dade County. Does that job interest you?
Look, I really don't know what I'm doing next, but right now I'm just focused on being the Speaker of the House, taking care of Miami-Dade County, eventually coming back home, which I haven't been here. It'll be 9 years. I'll be turned out after 9 years of serving the House. Of course, I love Miami, but that's not even on my radar right now.
When we come back, we'll get a different perspective from Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Stay with us.